I stayed when leaving would have been easier. I stayed because if I walked away, the fire would follow her. Snow was already eating the fence line when Jonah Mercer broke into a run. Oil burned wrong in the cold, and the wind carried it straight toward the barn. Clara stood on the porch, one hand braced on the doorframe, the other pressed low as pain tightened her breath. The baby cried once, thin and furious, as if he already knew the night was choosing sides. By morning, the town would call it an accident. By Sunday, they would call it order. Papers would appear with clean ink and dirty intent, asking a woman to move, a child to vanish, and a man to sign away what fire could not take. Jonah stamped out the last flame with his bare boot and looked up at the ridge, knowing this was only the beginning. The land was about to testify. The town would have to choose. But before the wind died, Jonah noticed something wrong. The oil-soaked rag hadn't come from uphill. Stay until the end to see how the town decides. Subscribe for more Western love stories. Comment the city you're watching from. I want to know how far this story travels. The wind came down the ridge like it had teeth. Snow cut sideways, hard enough to sting through wool and leather, and Jonah Mercer leaned into it without slowing, one hand low on the reins, the other tight at the saddle horn. His horse fought the drifts, breath steaming white, hooves punching blind into what had been a trail an hour ago. Jonah should have turned back. He knew that. The storm had already swallowed the fence line and erased the creek bend. But a sound kept pulling him forward. High, thin, wrong. Not a coyote, not a man. A horse crying out, panicked and dying. The kind of sound that only came when someone had nowhere left to go. He rode into the cut of the canyon and felt it before he saw it. A shape slumped against stone, half buried where wind had packed the snow like plaster. Jonah swung down hard, boots vanishing to the calf with each step. He dropped beside the body and brushed at the drift with bare hands until dark hair came free, rimed with ice. A woman. Her dress was torn and soaked, frozen to her skin. One glove was gone. The other hand was wrapped around a small cloth satchel, as if letting go would be the end of her. For one long second, she didn't move. Jonah pressed 2 fingers to her neck. A pulse answered, faint as a rumor. He bent close. "Ma'am," he said, voice rough from the cold. "You hear me?" Her lips were blue at the edges, skin like stone. He shrugged out of his coat, laid it over her shoulders, and pulled her upright. She weighed nothing, fabric and bone. When he lifted, her head lolled, and a sound slipped out of her, more breath than word. "Tilson Place?" she whispered. The name hit him square in the chest. He froze, snow hissing around them. "No," he said, quiet but firm. "There's no one at that ranch. Not anymore." Her eyes fluttered open, unfocused. She swallowed. "He wrote me," she said. "Missouri. Said, lantern at the depot." Jonah's jaw set. Tilson had been buried 2 weeks. Liver gone. Cold sped the rest. This woman had ridden into a blizzard for a ghost. She sagged in his arms. Jonah didn't think. He lifted her, turned, and hauled her to the saddle. The horse snorted and danced, but Jonah swung up behind her, wrapped his own coat around her, and pressed her back to his chest. Her breath fluttered against his ribs, light and fast. The wind bit through his shirt and burned like fire. He kicked the horse forward. "You don't get to die here." The cabin appeared through the white like a memory, light flickering behind frost-bitten glass, smoke bending low from the chimney. Jonah slid down, barely feeling his hands, and carried her inside. Heat hit like a wall. He moved fast, fire stoked, stones from the hearth, water set to simmer with salt and cedar. He peeled off her frozen boots, stripped the soaked dress with care, eyes averted, and wrapped her in flannel and wool until she looked like a child bundled for winter. She didn't wake. Hours passed. Jonah sat beside the cot, counting the rise and fall of her chest. It was shallow, but it was there. Every so often she made a sound, a small hitch of breath, and he leaned in without touching, afraid to steal what little warmth she had. Outside, the wind threw itself against the walls. The roof creaked. Jonah fed the fire and watched the ceiling like it might give way. By dawn, color had crept back into her cheeks. Enough. Jonah left a bowl of broth and a note on the stool by the cot. "Eat first." He stepped out to tend the horse, breath fogging, hands numb, heart still beating too fast. When Clara Whitlock opened her eyes, warmth was the first thing she noticed. Not blaze, steady. The kind that worked its way under the skin and stayed. Then the smell, herbs and meat and something clean. Her throat burned. She pushed herself up and hissed at the pain. The room was dim, walls of pine, a curtain strung for privacy. Beside the cot sat a bowl, a spoon, and the note. She read it twice. Her satchel was near her feet, damp but untouched. Her dress lay folded, dry now, and on top of it rested a man's flannel shirt. She pulled it on, fingers trembling. The door opened with a soft creak. Jonah stepped in carrying a bucket, shoulders broad, face weathered, eyes tired but not unkind. He stopped when he saw her awake. "That's good," he said. "You're awake." "Where am I?" Her voice came thin. "My place. Ridgeside." He set the bucket down. "I found you yesterday." Memory came in pieces. White, noise, the weight of snow. She swallowed. "I was looking for the Tilson Ranch." Jonah nodded once. "He's dead." The words landed and stayed. Clara looked at the window where snow pressed thick and white, erasing the world. "He sent for me," she said. 6 letters, promised land, a house. She took a breath that almost laughed and broke. "Mail order bride." "I believe you," Jonah said. He didn't soften it. He didn't harden it either. She looked at him, startled. "I don't even know your name." "Jonah. Clara." She stared at the floor. "I should go." Jonah pointed with his chin toward the window. "Try walking out in that. You won't last an hour." "I don't want to be a burden." "You're not." Silence stretched, heavy and honest. Jonah nodded at the bowl. "Eat. Rest. We'll talk after." She ate with shaking hands. It hurt going down, but it stayed. Warmth crept back. When Jonah stepped outside again, Clara lay back and listened to the wind lose its edge. For the first time in days, something inside her loosened. Not safety, not yet, but close. A thud sounded on the porch. Jonah was already standing, hand near the rifle by the door. He didn't speak. He moved to the window and lifted the curtain just enough to look. Clara sat up, heart thudding. "What is it?" she whispered. "Someone's out there," he said, low. He pulled on his coat and stepped into the snow. The door closed behind him. Clara clutched the blanket and waited. Breath held. The wind pressed hard against the cabin, but it held. Later, when Jonah came back in, snow clinging to his beard, she blurted the question that had been gnawing at her. "If Tilson's dead," she said, "who was I sent to find?" Jonah didn't answer right away. He set the rifle down and crossed the room, movements careful, like each step mattered. "Storm's still on us," he said instead. "You're staying." "I can't." "You can," he cut in, then softened it. "For now." She lay back, staring at the ceiling. A pain tightened low in her belly, and she sucked in a breath. Jonah's eyes flicked to her. He was at her side in 2 strides, voice steady. "Easy." "I'm fine," she said, though it wasn't true. She pressed a hand to her stomach. The pain eased, left her shaking. "I am not ready." Jonah reached into a drawer and came back with a small wooden spoon, smooth and pale, letters carved into the handle, an E, careful and deep. He set it by the bowl. "Stir with that," he said. "It won't splinter." Clara looked at the spoon, then at him. "For who?" "For the little one," he said, and that was all. Outside, the wind shifted. Snow fell softer now, like it was listening. Jonah watched the door, then turned back to Clara. "When the weather breaks," he said, "we'll have choices to make." She met his eyes. "What kind?" Jonah didn't flinch. "The kind that don't let you hide." The fire cracked. Somewhere beyond the ridge, a lantern flared and died. Jonah held her gaze and asked the question that opened the road ahead. "Do you want me to stand with you?" Morning did not arrive all at once. It crept. The storm loosened its grip by inches, wind dropping its voice, snow turning from a shout into a hiss. Jonah Mercer stood at the door and tested the air with his palm, then shut it again. Not yet. He fed the fire, split kindling with measured blows, and set water to warm. The cabin breathed. Clara Whitlock watched from the cot, counting his movements because counting kept the fear from getting loud. "You don't have to hover," she said. "I'm not," Jonah said. He slid a stool closer, set a mug within her reach. Steam rose. Sip. Slow. She obeyed. Warmth settled. Her hand steadied enough to untie the cord at her satchel. The cloth was patched and careful, the way a thing is when it matters. She drew out the letters, 6 of them, edges soft from travel. Jonah did not ask. He waited. Clara read the first aloud, voice level, each word a plank laid across water. Promises of land, a roof, a place for a family. The second spoke of a church bell and a Christmas service, of snow lit by candles. She faltered there and swallowed. "We don't have to," Jonah began. "I need to," she said. "If I don't, it'll read me instead." She moved to the last letter. The seal sat wrong, not broken, shifted. The wax had cooled uneven, a thumbprint smudged where no thumb should have been. Clara held it up to the light. Jonah leaned closer, careful not to touch. The pull came hard and sudden. "That seal's not right," he said. "I thought I imagined it," she said. He wrote like a man in a hurry. But this feels like someone else stepped in. Jonah's mouth tightened. He fetched a thin knife and warmed the blade at the hearth, then offered it handle first. She nodded and slid it under the wax. The paper parted with a soft sound that felt like a door opening. Inside was not a love note. It was a page of terms. Clara's breath went shallow. He wanted a signature, she said. Not a question. Mine. Jonah read over her shoulder. A clause set plain as a fence post. Spouse acknowledgement. Witnessed. Binding. The land description followed, legal and cold, a thing meant to outlast people. Clara pressed a hand to her belly, as if the paper could reach through her skin. They needed a wife, Jonah said, not a woman. She nodded, eyes bright but dry. And if I signed, it would have turned me into proof. The fire snapped. Outside, a gust rattled the shutters. Jonah folded the page and slid it back into the satchel. No one's getting that, he said. Not here. A knock landed on the door like a thrown stone. Jonah's hand found the rifle without looking. He paused, listening. The knock came again, firmer. He cracked the door and kept his body between the opening and the room. A man stood on the porch, hat brushed clean, boots polished in a way that did not belong to Snow. He smiled like it was practiced. Morning, he said, looking for a Miss Whitlock. Jonah did not answer. I represent an interest, the man went on. There's a matter of paperwork delayed by weather. Clara rose behind Jonah, steadying herself on the table. I'm here, she said. Her voice held. The man's eyes flicked to her belly and back. He did not let the smile slip. That simplifies things. Jonah closed the door another inch. It complicates them. The man produced a folder, held it up like a peace offering. Sign and you'll be on your way. Food, coin, a ride when the pass opens. Clara laughed once, sharp. On my way to where? The man shrugged. Anywhere else? Jonah felt the line draw itself in his chest. She said no, he said. That's your answer. The man's smile cooled. Refusal has consequences. So does trespass, Jonah said. He lifted the rifle just enough to make the point. The man tipped his hat. We'll speak again. He stepped off the porch, boots leaving no prints that would last. When the door shut, the cabin felt smaller. Clara sank back onto the cot, breath hitching. Jonah set the rifle aside and knelt, keeping his voice even. You did right. I know, she said. It still hurts. It came again, the tightening low and insistent. Clara closed her eyes and breathed the way her mother had taught her, slow and counted. Jonah fetched a cloth, warm and clean, and laid it on her belly without pressing. Tell me when, he said. She did. The pain rose and fell like a tide. When it eased, she opened her eyes and found Jonah watching the window, jaw set. They ate in silence. The day edged brighter. Snow fell straight down now, thick and quiet. Jonah took down a small wooden carving from a shelf, a simple star, edges worn smooth. He set it by the window. From my mother, he said, and that was all. The quiet did not last. Boots crunched outside. More than one set. Jonah stood, shoulders squaring. Clara felt the pull of fear and set her chin against it. A boy's voice called from the porch. Sir, sheriff sent me. Jonah opened the door. A young fellow stood there, hat too big, hands shoved into pockets. His eyes slid past Jonah, then back. "He wants you in town," the boy said. "Says it's urgent." Jonah shook his head. "Road's not clear." The boy swallowed. "He said to tell you there's talk." "About what?" The boy glanced at Clara. "About her." Clara stood. The room tilted and then steadied. "Let them talk," she said. "They always do." Jonah closed the door. He turned to her. "Town won't help today." "I don't need help," she said. "I need time." Time was the one thing the paper did not grant. By afternoon, the storm broke enough to show a strip of sky, pale and hard. Jonah went out to check the fence line. Clara followed to the threshold, wrapped in flannel, and watched him move through the snow with the ease of someone who knew where to place his feet. She felt the ache again and waited it out, counting breaths. "I am not alone." When Jonah came back, snow dusting his shoulders, he carried a bundle of mail tied with twine. "Found this snagged on the fence, he said. He set it down and cut the string. Inside lay a printed notice, ink sharp and new. It named the land. It named the terms. It named her. Clara read it once, twice. She folded it cleanly. "They're moving fast." "They always do," Jonah said. She met his eyes. "I won't run." "I know." Outside, the light shifted. Somewhere down the ridge, a bell rang once. Someone testing it for Sunday. The sound thin but true. Jonah listened, then looked back at Clara. "Road opens tomorrow," he said. "They'll come again. With more paper. Maybe men." She held the satchel to her chest. "Then we need to choose." Jonah nodded. He spoke like a man laying out tools on a bench. "We can go to town and let them frame you, or we can stay and make them show their hand." Clara did not answer right away. She watched the star by the window catch the light. She felt the small, stubborn life inside her shift, as if agreeing. "Stand with me," she said. Jonah did not hesitate. "I will." The wind sighed along the eaves, tired at last. Jonah lifted the folded notice and set it on the table between them, a thing that wanted something it could not take without permission. Tomorrow would decide who owned the truth. The road opened by inches, the way a wound does when it decides not to kill you. Jonah Mercer led the horse slow, testing each step where snow thinned to slush and stone. Clara Whitlock rode wrapped tight, one hand on the saddle horn, the other pressed to her belly when the ache rose and settled again. The valley breathed out. Sound came back. Water under ice. A crow somewhere awake too early. Town lay ahead. Low roofs and smoke. The bell crouched at the edge like it was thinking. They did not speak. Words felt like they might spill something if set loose. At the hitching rail, Jonah swung down and steadied Clara. Boots met ground. She stood on her own. That mattered. He handed her the satchel. She nodded once and stepped forward, head up, eyes clear. The first looks came quick, then the second ones, longer. People watched the way people do when they've already decided something and want to see if it fits. The general store door banged open. A man paused mid-step, saw Clara, and turned back inside without a word. Someone else crossed the street. The bell rang once as if by accident. Jonah kept pace, half a step behind, not touching. Clara walked like she had learned to count her steps in hard places. The ache came again. Sharper this time. She breathed through it, slow, counted. When it passed, she did not show the shake. Inside the sheriff's office, heat pooled low. Paper and ink smelled fresh. The sheriff stood behind the desk, hat off, eyes tired. He looked at Jonah, then at Clara. "Miss," he said, "you should sit." "I'm fine," Clara said. She did not sit. He nodded. "There's a notice," he said, tapping a printed sheet. "Claims, signatures." Clara set the satchel on the desk and opened it. She laid out the letters, careful, edges straight. Then the page with the wrong seal. She did not rush. "This is what I was sent," she said. "This is what they want." The sheriff leaned in. He squinted at the wax, the shift in the stamp. "That seal's wrong," Jonah said. A murmur grew at the door. Someone had brought news with them. The room filled, quiet as a held breath. Clara felt it and did not turn. "They told me I'd be safe if I signed," she said. "Food, coin, a ride away." She met the sheriff's eyes. "Away from what?" "From trouble," someone said behind her. Clara turned then. She faced the room. "From the truth," she said. Her voice did not rise. It carried anyway. The ache flared hard enough to steal her breath. She braced a hand on the desk. Jonah moved closer without touching. The sheriff watched her face change color and made a decision. "All of you," he said to the room, "step back." They did not. A man in a clean coat stepped forward. He smiled like a hinge that had never squeaked. "Miss Whitlock," he said, "there's no need for this." Clara nodded. "Then stop it." He spread his hands. "The land needs clarity." "It needs honesty," she said. He lifted the printed notice. "Sign and be done." Clara reached for the paper, took it from him, and tore it clean down the middle. The sound was small and loud at once. For a heartbeat, no one moved. Jonah felt the pull then, the moment when a room decides what it is. He kept his hands at his sides. The clean coat man's smile thinned. "That was foolish." Clara held the torn halves. "What's foolish," she said, "is thinking paper outranks a body." The sheriff cleared his throat. "You'll have to leave," he said to the clean coat. "Now." The man laughed once. "We'll see." Outside, voices lifted. Someone ran. Someone else swore. The clean coat tipped his hat and stepped out, already planning. The room exhaled. The ache returned, steady and deep. Clara closed her eyes. Jonah was there, his voice low. "Tell me when." "Now," she said. They did not have privacy, but they had space. The sheriff pushed chairs back. A woman brought water. Jonah counted with Clara, slow and exact. When it eased, she opened her eyes and found the room changed. Faces had softened. Not all of them. Enough. A boy stood near the door, hat twisted in his hands. He watched the floor like it might accuse him. Jonah saw the tremor in his fingers. Outside, the bell rang again. Once, then twice. The sound threaded through the room and tied it together. "You should rest," the sheriff said. "I'll hold what I can." "What you can won't be enough," Clara said. "They won't stop." "No," he said, "they won't." They stepped back into the street. Snow had turned to a wet shine. A woman crossed herself as Clara passed, quick and quiet. Someone pressed a roll into Jonah's hand without looking. He returned it. "Keep it," he said. The man nodded, ashamed and grateful both. At the edge of town, a boy waited, shifting foot to foot. He spoke without lifting his head. "They paid me to say I saw her sign," he said. "I didn't. I swear." Clara looked at him. "Why tell us?" The boy swallowed. "Because it's wrong." Jonah held the boy's gaze. "You'll have to say it again," he said. "Louder." The boy nodded. He looked terrified. He also looked relieved. On the ride back, clouds gathered where the ridge narrowed. Jonah felt the air turn. He urged the horse on. Halfway home, smoke lifted where it should not have been. They reached the cabin to find the fence blackened and a line of fire creeping through the scrub, slow but hungry. Jonah swung down and ran for the creek, shovel in hand. Clara dismounted and followed, breath tight, heart pounding. "Stay back," Jonah said. "I won't," she said, and did not. They worked in silence, beating flame, dragging wet earth, the heat sharp against cold skin. The fire licked and hissed and backed away. When it was done, the fence lay in pieces, the ground scarred. The cabin still stood. Clara leaned on the post, shaking now. Jonah steadied her. She pressed her forehead to his shoulder and breathed until the world settled. "I choose this." Night came fast. Jonah set the door bar and fed the fire. Clara lay on the cot, exhausted. The ache had quieted, leaving a deep tired that felt earned. From the fence line came a sound. Boots. A shadow moved where it should not. Jonah lifted the rifle and did not point it yet. "Jonah," a voice called, soft. "We need to talk." Jonah did not answer. He watched the shadow shift, heard the careful step meant to show respect. He felt the room behind him, Clara breathing, the small life inside her keeping time. "What do you want?" Jonah said at last. "To make this easy," the voice said, "there's still a way." Jonah looked back at Clara. She met his eyes and nodded, a single sure motion. He stepped to the door and asked the question that would decide how morning came. "What are you offering, truth or fire?" The answer did not come right away. Snow whispered along the fence posts, a soft sound that pretended to be peace. Jonah Mercer stood in the doorway with the rifle low, not aimed, not lowered either. The shadow beyond the yard shifted its weight, careful, patient. A man who believed patience was a kind of leverage. "Truth," the voice said at last, "if you're willing to listen." Jonah waited another breath, then another. He stepped out just far enough that the lamplight cut his outline clean. "Say it," he said. The man moved into view. Clean coat again, collar turned up, hands open. He did not look at the rifle. He looked past Jonah, toward the window where light held steady. "Miss Whitlock is carrying something valuable," he said. "That puts her at risk." "She's carrying a child," Jonah said. "And land," the man said gently, like correcting a child. "Paper says both." Jonah felt the old heat rise, the one that had nothing to do with fire. "Paper doesn't breathe." The man smiled, thin and professional. "It does when witnesses help it." Jonah leaned closer. "You should go." "Think about it," the man said. "We can make the town forget today ever happened. No more notices, no more boys with loose tongues." He tipped his hat. "Christmas is close. People like clean endings." He turned and walked back into the dark, boots careful to leave no prints worth following. Jonah shut the door and barred it. The cabin felt tighter. He fed the fire and listened to the wind test the walls. Clara Whitlock lay on the cot, eyes open, hands folded where the ache came and went like a tide that knew its hours. "He offered," Jonah said. "I know," Clara said. "He always will." They did not talk about it more. They ate what was left of the stew and drank water warmed by the hearth. Jonah checked the window latches and laid the rifle where he could reach it without moving. Clara watched him and measured the night by his steps. Sleep came in pieces. She woke to pain sharp enough to steal sound. Jonah was there before she called his name, kneeling, voice steady. "Easy. Breathe with me." They counted together. It rose. It passed. Sweat cooled on her neck. Jonah wiped her brow with a clean cloth and did not say anything that would make it smaller than it was. When morning came, it brought gray light and a cold so clean it hurt. The ridge held its breath. Jonah stepped outside and scanned the line where fence met scrub. Smoke did not rise. Tracks did not linger. The quiet felt staged. Clara sat up and drew the satchel close. "They'll come back," she said. "Yes," Jonah said. "And town?" "We'll choose when it has to." She nodded. "Then we make them have to." By midday, the road carried sound again. Hooves, a wagon, voices trying to be casual. Jonah stood at the window and watched 3 men ride in, one on either side of the clean coat. They did not rush. They did not need to. The knock came. Not a stone this time. Knuckles, polite. Jonah opened the door. "You've said enough." "Not yet," the clean coat said. He held out a folded paper. "This one is different." Clara rose and came to stand beside Jonah. Her balance wavered. She corrected it without apology. "What's different," she said, "is I won't read it." The man's smile did not change. "Then I will." He cleared his throat. "Notice of temporary seizure pending adjudication. Safety reasons." He glanced at her belly. "Condition." Jonah stepped forward. "You don't have that authority." The man shrugged. "Sheriff does." Clara looked past him, down the road. "Then bring him." The men exchanged a look. The clean coat's smile slipped, just a fraction. "He's occupied." A bell rang in the distance. Once, then again. A sound that belonged to hands and rope and intention. Jonah felt the line snap tight. He did not raise the rifle. He set it down on the table where it could be seen. "You're done here," he said. "Leave." The men did not move. Clara took a breath that felt like a door opening inside her chest. "I will go to town," she said. "Now." Jonah turned. "You shouldn't." "I should," she said. "They're counting on me not to." The clean coat spread his hands. "We can provide an escort." "No," Jonah said at the same time Clara said, "Yes." They looked at each other. The ache stirred and settled. Clara touched Jonah's sleeve. "With you," she said. "Not them." Jonah nodded once. He gathered coat and reins. "Then we go." They reached town under a sky that had decided to be brittle. The bell stood open, rope tied back, waiting. People were already there, drawn by rumor and the sound of something about to happen. The sheriff stood on the steps, hat in hand, eyes on the ground. Clara stepped forward. "Sheriff," she said. He looked up. "Miss." "They're seizing my person," she said. "On paper." The clean coat lifted his notice. "For safety." "For silence," Clara said. She turned to the crowd. "I was sent here by letter. Those letters were not written in good faith. The seal is wrong. The clause is hidden. They want my name because it makes their claim walk." A murmur moved the crowd. Jonah felt it like weather. The sheriff cleared his throat. "There's process." "Then process it," Clara said. She held out the satchel. "Here." The sheriff hesitated. Jonah watched his hands shake as he took the letters. He read. He frowned. He read again. He looked up at the clean coat. "This seal is fine," the man said. "It's not," a voice said from the back. A boy stepped forward, hat crushed in his hands. He did not look up. "They paid me," he said, "to say she signed." The sound that followed was not loud. It was a shifting, a taking in of air, a room deciding again. The clean coat laughed. "This is a child." The boy lifted his head. "I saw nothing," he said, "because nothing happened." The sheriff held up a hand. "Enough." He turned to the clean coat. "You'll wait." The man's eyes went hard. "You're making a mistake." The mistake came later. That night the wind turned. Jonah woke to the smell of it before the sound. Dry, sharp, wrong. He was on his feet and out the door in one motion. Flame ran the fence line like a thought you couldn't stop once it started. "Stay inside," he shouted. Clara was already there, wrapped and steady. "No!" They worked until their arms shook. Wet earth, shovel. Hands burned numb, then burned hot. Smoke stung the eyes. The fire tested and retreated, leaving black scars in the shape of what it wanted. When it was done, Jonah leaned on the shovel and breathed. Clara sat on the step, chest heaving, hand pressed low. The pain rose and fell, stronger this time, and she did not hide it. "Tell me when," Jonah said. "Now," she said. He counted with her. The world narrowed. When it eased, she leaned back against the door and closed her eyes. Snow began again, soft and forgiving, like it wanted to make amends. They did not sleep much. At dawn, the sheriff rode up alone. He dismounted and removed his hat. "I held what I could," he said. "It won't be enough." "I know," Clara said. He looked at the burned fence, the blackened earth. They crossed a line. "They always do," Jonah said. The sheriff met Clara's eyes. "I can call for a territorial officer," he said. "It will take a day." "A day is long," she said. "And short," he said, "if you're willing." Clara closed her eyes and listened to the small, stubborn life inside her keep time. She opened them and nodded. "Do it." The sheriff mounted and rode. Jonah barred the door and set water to warm. He placed the wooden spoon by the bowl and set the carved star back in the window. Light caught on its edges. Outside, the ridge held. Inside, Clara breathed through another wave and found Jonah's hand when it passed. He did not promise what he could not control. He stayed. "I will not be moved." By afternoon, a dust line rose on the road. Jonah watched it grow, then resolve into a single rider with a leather case strapped tight. The horse slowed. The rider dismounted. A territorial officer knocked once and waited. Jonah opened the door. The man held up a badge and a folded order. I'm here to see a Miss Whitlock, he said. Jonah stepped aside. The officer looked at Clara, then at the satchel on the table, then at the burned fence beyond the window. He drew a breath. Ma'am, he said, I need you to tell me everything. Clara met Jonah's eyes. The ache stirred, then settled. She nodded and began, careful and exact, laying each word where it would hold. Outside, the wind quieted. Inside, the paper learned it could not speak for itself. The officer listened without moving, the way a fence listens to wind. Clara spoke slowly, placing dates where they belonged, holding letters by the corners so the ink wouldn't smudge, naming the gaps the way a teacher names mistakes without raising her voice. Jonah stood back, hands empty, letting the room belong to truth for once. When she finished, the officer nodded and set the papers down. I'll need witnesses, he said. Living ones. They're outside, Jonah said. By noon, the cabin yard filled the way water finds a low place. Neighbors came in twos and threes, boots muddy, hats in hand. They didn't talk much. They looked at the burned fence, the blackened strip where fire had tried to write its name, and they remembered other losses that had started smaller than this. The officer took statements, names scratched onto a ledger. The boy stood and told his part again, voice steady now that it had chosen a side. The sheriff arrived late, jaw tight, and stood where everyone could see him. I bought time, he said. That's all I had. Time is enough, Clara said. If you don't waste it. The officer closed the ledger. I'll post a hold, he said. No transfer, no seizure. He looked at Jonah. But paper moves slow. So do winters, Jonah said. They still get there. The officer mounted and rode. The yard emptied the way it had filled, leaving ruts and quiet, and the smell of damp wool. Clara sat and drank broth while Jonah reset the fence posts that could still stand. The boy worked beside him without being asked. Toward evening, the sky took on that color that means choices. Jonah was driving a post when he heard the wagon. He did not look up until the wheels stopped. The clean coat stood in the yard again, alone this time. No escort, no smile. You went around me, he said. I went forward, Clara said from the doorway. You can't win, he said, even if you're right. Clara stepped down. Her hand went to her belly and stayed there, not for balance, but for courage. I don't need to win, she said. I need to stay. The man's eyes flicked to Jonah. You think this ends with a stamp? Jonah wiped his hands. I think it ends with you leaving. The man laughed once, sharp. You're sentimental, he said. It'll cost you. He turned and walked back to his wagon. The wheels creaked as he drove away. Jonah watched until the dust settled. That night the pain came back with a rhythm that made time honest. Jonah kept the fire low and steady. Clara counted breaths and pressed her feet against the floorboards until the room remembered her weight. Between waves, she slept. Between sleeps, she prayed without words, the way you do when you don't want to ask for more than strength. Snow fell again, light as ash. At dawn, a rider came hard. The boy saw him first and ran. They're coming, he said, more than before. Jonah looked at the ridge. 3 riders, then 5. A wagon behind them, canvas tied tight. The clean coat rode in front. The sheriff arrived from the other side at the same time, breathless, hand on his gun. He did not draw. The riders stopped at the fence line. The clean coat dismounted and held up a paper like a flag. "Filed," he said. "Certified." The officer's hold lay miles away, slow as mercy. Jonah felt the weight settle. Clara stepped forward before he could speak. "You won't cross," she said. "We will," the man said. "With or without you." She nodded. "Then do it where everyone can see." People were already gathering, drawn by the sound of it. The preacher came with his coat unbuttoned. The storekeeper. 2 ranchers who did not owe favors. A woman with a basket who set it down and stayed. The clean coat's men shifted. The wagon canvas snapped in the wind. "This is private land," Jonah said. "So is the church," the man said. "Still burns." That was when the fire started. It did not roar at first. It whispered. A curl of smoke rose behind the barn, thin and deliberate. Someone had struck when eyes were elsewhere. Jonah ran. Clara followed until the pain took her breath and made the ground tilt. The boy hauled water with both arms. Buckets flew, shovels bit. Smoke thickened and the world narrowed to heat and work. The fire wanted the barn. It wanted the dry timbers and the hay. Jonah drove a line with dirt and wet sacks. The boy slipped and fell and got up again without being told. Clara grabbed a wet blanket and smothered Sparks with hands that shook from more than cold. The pain rose and broke her voice. She did not stop. The sheriff shouted orders that mattered now. Neighbors moved as one body. The fire tested and failed, leaving scars and the smell of defeat. When it was done, the clean coat stood with ash on his cuff. He looked around and understood he had misjudged the room. "This isn't over," he said. "It is here," the preacher said, stepping forward. "We saw." The sheriff took out his cuffs. "You're done," he said, and put them on the clean coat, while the man laughed like someone who had never been laughed at before. They took him away with the wagon still smoking. Clara sat on the ground and let the shaking come. Jonah knelt and held her shoulders until it passed. The boy stood close, eyes wide, learning what it cost to tell the truth and what it saved. By nightfall, the pain changed. It did not leave. It gathered. Jonah set water to boil and laid clean cloths by the fire. He did not ask questions that would not help. He stayed. "I'm scared," Clara said, once when the room went quiet. "So am I," Jonah said. They counted together. Time bent. Snow piled against the door, and the carved star caught the lamplight and held it. Near midnight, the cry came thin and furious, like a promise keeping itself. Jonah's hands shook once and then steadied. He did what needed doing and nothing more. When it was over, the room held a small sound that changed everything. Jonah wrapped the child and placed him where Clara could see. The boy's face went soft at the sight, like he had been waiting his whole life for permission to hope. "He's here," Jonah said. Clara laughed and cried at the same time and pressed her forehead to the small, warm crown. "Evan," she said. Outside, the wind laid down. Inside, the fire learned a new job. At dawn, the territorial officer rode back with papers that mattered now. He looked at the barn, the scars, the faces that had stayed. "This will hold," he said. Clara did not answer. She slept with the child, breathing against her, and Jonah watching the door. The officer left the papers on the table. Jonah slid them under the Bible and locked the latch. By afternoon, a knock came that was not a threat. The sheriff stood on the porch, hat in hand. "There's talk," he said. "Good talk." Jonah nodded. The sheriff glanced inside and smiled despite himself. "You'll need help," he said. "We'll take it," Jonah said. That evening, the preacher came with bread, the storekeeper with sugar. The woman with the basket returned and left it full. No one spoke much. They did not need to. Clara held Evan and watched the room fill with small, useful gifts. Jonah carved a second spoon by firelight and set it by the bowl. Later, when the house was quiet again, Clara looked at Jonah. "They'll try another way." "Yes," Jonah said. She shifted the child and met his eyes. "Stay." Jonah did not answer right away. He listened to the fire, the breathing, the night learning new boundaries. "I'm not leaving," he said. Outside, snow began again, gentle as a benediction. Morning came careful, as if it knew what the night had cost. The fire had burned down to coals that still meant work, not warmth. Jonah Mercer woke first and listened to the room learn its new shape. The child breathed in small, stubborn pulls. Clara Whitlock slept with one hand curved over that sound, fingers twitching when it changed. Jonah fed the stove and warmed water. He did not move fast. He moved sure. Outside, the snow had softened the scars, but not erased them. Fence posts leaned like tired men. The barn wore black along its lower boards where flame had tested it and failed. A knock came after sunrise, the kind that asked instead of took. Jonah opened the door and found the sheriff without his gun hand raised, hat tucked under his arm. "I'm not here for trouble," the sheriff said. Jonah nodded once and stepped aside. The sheriff stood in the doorway and saw the child and let his breath go. "You did right," he said, and it sounded like relief more than judgment. "The officers' hold stands for now." "For now is a start," Jonah said. The sheriff glanced out at the yard. "They'll try again," he said. Quietly. "They always do," Jonah said. The sheriff left a folded notice on the table and went back into the cold. Jonah slid the paper beneath the Bible and set the latch. He did not trust paper alone. He trusted hands that stayed. Clara woke when the kettle sang. She smiled without opening her eyes, then did, and the smile changed shape. "He's still here," she said. "Yes," Jonah said. She drank broth and ate bread. The child rooted and found what he needed, and the room learned a different rhythm. Jonah stood watch by habit, then caught himself and sat. By noon, neighbors came again. Not in a crowd this time, in pairs. A sack of flour, a coil of wire, a board cut to size without being asked. They left things and left space. It was the right kind of kindness. The preacher paused at the threshold. He did not bless. He nodded. "If you need me," he said, meaning more than words. Later, the boy returned with a bandage on his palm and a look that had settled. He took the shovel and worked the fence line until the sun dropped behind the ridge. That was when the clean coat tried another way. A rider came alone, not fast, not slow. Jonah saw him from the window and felt the old heat flicker. The rider stopped at the fence and did not dismount. He called out, polite as a store clerk. "I've got a letter," he said. Jonah stepped onto the porch. "You can leave it on the post." The rider smiled like someone used to doors opening. "It's an offer." Jonah shook his head. "We're not buying." "It's generous," the rider said. "Enough to walk away." Clara came to stand beside Jonah. She did not hold the child this time. She held herself. "There's no price," she said. The rider's smile thinned. "There's always a number." She took a breath that steadied her feet. "Then you're bad at counting." The rider tipped his hat and rode off. The sound of hooves faded. Jonah waited until it did, then closed the door. That night the child slept long, the way the body sleeps after choosing life. Clara sat at the table and sorted letters by lamplight, checking dates, seals, margins. She made notes on scraps, careful and exact. Jonah carved without looking at his hands. "They're circling," she said. "They get tired," Jonah said. She smiled at that and kept working. 2 days later, the weather broke. Snow slid from the roof in slow sheets. Water ran where it hadn't in weeks. The ridge breathed again. Jonah took the shovel and cleared channels so melt would not turn mean. The boy followed and learned. By afternoon, smoke rose from the south, thin and wrong. Jonah smelled oil beneath it. He ran. The fire had found the brush where the wind would help it. Jonah beat it back with wet sacks while the pit hauled water until his arms shook. Clara stood at the porch and shouted when sparks leapt, pointing where the line needed help. The pain tried to steal her balance. She took it back. Neighbors arrived without being sent for. The fire did not win. It left a black path and a lesson. When it was done, the sheriff came again, breathless. "That's enough," he said. "I'll swear it." "You should," Clara said. He did. Paper moved slower than flame, but it moved. That evening, Jonah sat on the step and watched the light go. Clara brought the child and sat beside him. The boy leaned against the post and listened to the wind learn a new direction. "I don't regret it," Clara said. Jonah nodded. "Good." She turned her face to him. "Do you?" He did not answer right away. He watched the fence line hold. "No," he said. "I choose this." The days that followed took on work. Repair. Planting where ash had cooled. The boy learned to set wire straight. Jonah learned to sleep between cries. Clara learned the house's small sounds and which ones mattered. A letter came by hand, not post. The territorial seal pressed hard enough to leave a bruise. The hold became a stay. The stay grew teeth. The clean coat did not return. Winter loosened its grip. The ridge kept watch. The town talked and did not whisper. One afternoon, Jonah found Clara standing by the fence, the child warm against her chest. She was reading the land the way some people read scripture. "You thinking of leaving?" he asked. "No," she said. "I'm thinking of staying better." He nodded. That made sense. A week later, the sheriff rode up with a man in a brown coat and a satchel that meant business. They dismounted and walked the line. They measured where the fire had tried. They wrote where it had failed. "This will hold," the man said. "For how long?" Jonah asked. "As long as you do," the man said. That night, the house filled again. Bread, sugar, a small star carved from pine that caught the light and held it. No one said Christmas. They did not need to. Clara rocked the child and watched the faces. Jonah stood with his back to the door because that was how he loved. The boy laughed once and covered his mouth like he had broken a rule. Later, when the house was quiet and the fire low, Clara looked at Jonah. "They'll try another shape." "Yes," he said. She shifted the child and waited. Jonah listened to the ridge and the breathing and the house that held. "If they do," he said, "we'll be here." Outside, the first green showed where ash had been. Inside, the night learned to trust the morning. Spring did not arrive all at once. It tested the ground the way a careful hand tests a wound, slow, honest, unwilling to promise more than it could keep. Jonah Mercer woke to the sound of water moving where ice had ruled, a low run beneath the earth that meant the ridge had begun to forgive. The house answered differently now. The child's breath stitched the hours together. Clara Whitlock moved through the rooms with a steadiness earned, not given, pausing when the ache tugged, continuing when it let her. Jonah learned the language of that pause. He did not rush it. He did not name it. Work came back like muscle memory. Jonah rebuilt the southern fence with posts set deeper than before. The boy followed and learned to tamp dirt until it held. They worked without talk, the way men do when words would only get in the way of keeping something upright. By midday, a wagon creaked up the road, not fast, not hiding. The sheriff rode alongside it, jaw set. A man in a brown coat walked behind, boots clean enough to be noticed. Jonah set the hammer down. He waited at the gate. "We're surveying," the man said. "Final lines." "Then walk," Jonah said. They did. The brown coat measured. He wrote. He checked his work and checked it again. He did not look at Clara until the last mark was set. When he did, he nodded once, as if to say the ground had spoken clearly enough. "It holds," he said, "as written." The sheriff let out a breath he'd been carrying since winter. "That's it, then." "For paper," Jonah said. "For paper," the man agreed. They left. The road took them. The ridge did not change its mind. That afternoon, Clara sat on the step with the child asleep against her chest. She watched Jonah set the last wire and felt the quiet gather around the work. She did not mistake it for safety. She took it for what it was: time. "I found something," she said when Jonah came in. He wiped his hands. "What kind of something?" She held up a folded page, edges soft from being handled too often. "It was tucked behind the lining. One letter I missed." Jonah did not reach for it. "Read it." She did. It was short. A promise written when breath was already counting itself. It named a clause. It named a fear. It named her, not as a person, but as a solution. Clara folded it and set it down. "It explains too much." Jonah nodded. "Then it doesn't explain anything that matters." She smiled at that and fed the stove. 2 days later, a rider came hard from the north. He did not slow at the fence. He did not smile. "They're stirring again," he said. Quiet, but real. Jonah listened. "Where?" "In town," the rider said. "They're buying words." Clara felt the old heat rise, then settle. "Let them," she said. "Words burn." The rider hesitated. "Not all of them." That night, a notice appeared on the post by the road. No seal, no signature, just a sentence that pretended to be a fact. Jonah tore it down and fed it to the fire. The next morning, the town paper arrived folded wrong. The headline leaned. Clara read it twice. It did not accuse. It suggested. It planted a question where there had been none. Jonah watched her face and knew. "We answer," he said. "Yes," she said. "Where they can hear." They went in together. The boy stayed back, mending a harness with careful hands. The hall filled the way it always did when truth decided to walk in on its own feet. Not full. Enough. The editor stood and cleared his throat. The preacher sat with his hands folded. The storekeeper leaned against the wall and watched the door. Clara did not raise her voice. She laid out dates. She laid out margins. She held the letter up and named the ink where it changed. She named the fire where it started. She named the money without naming men. The room moved. It did not clap. It breathed. The editor nodded and made notes that would cost him something. The preacher said nothing and stood where he could be seen. The sheriff watched the back row and counted faces. Outside, the sky held. They walked home under a sun that did not hurry. Jonah carried the child for a mile and did not hand him back when his arms tired. Clara let him. At the gate, Jonah stopped. He looked at the fence, the barn, the line where Ash had been. "If they come again," he said, "it won't be like before." Clara nodded. "It never is." That evening, the boy came running. "Smoke," he said, pointing. It was not fire this time. It was dust, a wagon, light and fast, with 2 riders flanking. They did not stop. Jonah watched them pass and counted the turns. "They're testing routes," he said. "Let them," Clara said. "They'll learn the land answers back." Night came. Wind laid down. The child slept long and deep. Jonah sat at the table and carved without looking. Clara wrote by lamplight, copying entries clean, setting them in an order that could be followed. They did not speak. They did not need to. A knock came after midnight. Not hard, not soft. Jonah opened the door and found the boy, eyes wide, breath short. "I heard them," he said, "talking by the creek." Jonah took the lantern. "Stay." Clara stood anyway. "I'm coming." He did not argue. They moved together, quiet as work. At the creek, voices rose and fell, plans that did not include mourning. Jonah stepped into the light. The men froze like animals caught between hunger and sense. "You're on recorded land," Jonah said. "You leave now." One laughed, then saw Clara, then saw the lantern held steady. They left. Back at the house, Jonah barred the door. Clara sat and pressed her hands flat until the shaking stopped. "I won't be chased," she said. "I know," Jonah said. "I am done running." Morning came. The ridge held. A rider brought word by noon, charges filed, names named. It would take time. Time came with its own work, planting where ash had cooled, repairing where fire had tried. The boy learned to read numbers. Clara taught him without calling it teaching. One afternoon, Jonah found Clara at the fence again, the child awake and watching the world with serious eyes. "He's strong," Jonah said. "He is," Clara said. "So are we." Jonah nodded. "That's the problem." She looked at him. And the answer. At dusk, the town bell rang once. Not alarm. Announcement. The paper would run a correction. The editor had decided what he could live with. They stood on the porch and listened. Jonah's hand found Clara's without looking. The child kicked and stilled. Later, when the house was quiet and the fire low, Clara spoke into the space that always listened. "If this breaks again—" "It won't," Jonah said. She met his eyes. If it does. He did not look away. Then we hold again. Outside, the long thaw worked its way into the ground. Inside, the house that held learned it could. The correction ran small, which was how truths survived in that town. Not bold, not loud, placed where a careful eye would find it. Jonah Mercer folded the paper and set it by the stove, the edge curling in the heat. Clara Whitlock read it once, then again, and did not smile. She knew better than to celebrate what still breathed. Work kept them honest. The thaw softened the ground enough to take seed, and Jonah marked rows with a heel and a glance. The boy carried water and learned the weight of waiting. Clara wrote lists and crossed them out, the way a life is built when you stop asking permission. By midweek, a rider brought word that the clean coat had left the county line, not fled, repositioned. Jonah listened without moving. "He'll test another seam," he said. "Then we won't be the only ones holding," Clara said. The house learned that sound, too, the low agreement of walls when people decide to stay. On Thursday, the wind changed and brought voices from town. The sheriff arrived with a man who did not wear a badge, but carried authority like a tool he knew how to put down. They walked the fence again, slower this time. They wrote less. They looked more. "It's quiet," the man said. "For now," Jonah said. The man nodded. "Quiet is when you fix what breaks next." That night, the creek rose without asking. Jonah and the boy set stones where water wanted to wander. Clara stood on the bank and called when the current tried a different mind. They worked until the moon made silver of the water, and the ache learned it would not be indulged. By morning, the creek held its line. A wagon came after breakfast, not fast, not hiding. 2 women climbed down with baskets and did not ask where to put them. One set bread on the table, the other held the child and counted fingers and toes as if that were a kind of vow. "We heard," one said. "Then you know enough," Clara said. They stayed an hour and left the house warmer than it had been. The paper tried again the next day, softer this time. An opinion unsigned, wondering out loud whether arrangements might benefit all parties. Jonah tore it into 4 even pieces and burned it one by one. He did not hurry. Clara watched the ash. "They want fatigue," she said. "They'll get fences," Jonah said. The boy laughed once, then stopped himself, then laughed again because no one told him not to. At noon, a man Jonah did not know stopped at the gate. He carried a ledger and the look of someone paid to count. "I'm here to inventory," the man said. "Inventory what?" Jonah said. "Assets," the man said, glancing toward the barn. Clara stepped forward. "There's nothing for sale." The man cleared his throat. "I'm required to list." Jonah leaned on the post. "List the fence, Bissum," he said. "It holds." The man wrote and frowned and wrote again. He did not look back as he left. That evening, the boy came in with a look that had learned to speak without words. "Someone was asking about roots," he said. Jonah nodded. "They're mapping," he said. "Then we'll change the map," Clara said. They did, in the only ways that mattered. They fixed what was obvious and left the rest looking unremarkable. They moved things that did not need moving and left what did. They made the place boring to thieves and legible to friends. A knock came after dark. Jonah opened the door to find the sheriff, hat in hand, breath thin. Someone tried to light brush south of the creek, he said. It didn't take. Who? Clara asked. The sheriff shook his head. Not clean, not smart. Jonah looked past him into the night. They're testing courage now, he said. They'll find it, the sheriff said, and stayed long enough to see it. On Saturday, Clara rode into town with the child wrapped tight and the boy walking at the stirrup. She did not stop at the store first. She went to the hall. The editor was there, ink on his sleeve and doubt on his face. I want a column, she said. He blinked. About what? Dates, she said. Margins. What burns when you hold it too close? He hesitated. It's not loud, she said. It's exact. He nodded. Bring it. She did. He read and set it aside and read again. He printed it as written. It did not accuse. It taught. By Monday, the talk had changed shape. Less heat, more questions. People asked about seals and clauses and why fires start where wind helps. Jonah listened from the edge of it and did not correct anyone unless they asked. The ridge kept watch. Midweek brought rain. Not hard. Enough. The ground took it like a promise that had been kept before. Jonah planted, and the boy followed, pressing soil with the flat of his palm the way he'd been shown. Clara marked rows and measured shade. At dusk, the child fussed and then settled when Jonah took him. Clara watched the way Jonah's shoulders learned to soften without instruction. You're good at this, she said. He did not look up. I pay attention. She smiled and wrote it down later without naming him. A rider came at nightfall with a letter folded wrong. No seal, no hand worth recognizing. Jonah did not open it. He fed it to the stove. Do you want to know? Clara asked. No, Jonah said. I know enough. Thursday brought a meeting that did not announce itself. 3 wagons parked along the road and stayed. Men and women came and went with tools. Someone fixed the church roof. Someone patched the school window. No one asked who started it. By Friday, the fence line shone with fresh wire where it had sagged. The boy stood back and admired it like art. Jonah clapped him once on the shoulder. The boy pretended not to notice. That afternoon, a man Jonah recognized from the clean coat's orbit rode up alone. He did not dismount. I'm here to talk, he said. Jonah stepped to the gate. Say it. The man swallowed. He's done with you, he said. There are other fights. Jonah nodded. Good. The man hesitated. He'll need something to blame. Jonah's eyes went to the ridge. He can have winter, he said. The man rode away without argument. That night, the house filled with a sound Clara had not known how to name until it was there. Laughter that did not need to be careful. It did not last long. It did not need to. When the fire burned low, Clara sat at the table and gathered the letters. She tied them with string and placed them beneath the Bible and turned the key. Jonah watched her do it and felt the room agree. You think it's enough? She asked. For now, he said. And later? He listened to the child breathe and the creek keep its line. Later, he said, we'll be here. Outside, rain learned the roof. Inside, what stayed written did not ask permission to remain. The quiet did not last. It never did. It thinned the way ice thins, slow, almost polite, until a crack ran through it, and the sound told you what had been waiting underneath. Jonah Mercer heard the horse before the knock. Not the horse itself, the way it stopped short, the way a rider dismounted without letting the leather complain. He rose from the table and set the mug down where it wouldn't tip. The child slept, one small fist caught in the fold of Clara Whitlock's shirt, breathing even. The knock came again, firm, certain. Jonah opened the door. The man on the porch wore town boots, scuffed just enough to look honest. His hat brim was clean. His eyes were not. "Evening," he said. "I'm here on business." "State it," Jonah said. The man glanced past him, into the room where the lamplight fell soft and useful. "There's a petition," he said. "Signatures are collecting." "For what?" Jonah asked. "To relocate," the man said, like it was a kindness. "For safety, temporary." Clara stood, careful not to wake the child. "Temporary always means permanent," she said. The man smiled, thin. "Only if you resist." Jonah felt the old heat gather. He did not move. "You can leave." "I can't," the man said. "I've got names." Clara stepped forward. She did not raise her voice. "Then read them." The man hesitated. He did not expect that. He reached into his coat and drew out the paper. It was long. He began. Halfway through, his voice caught. He looked up at faces he knew, neighbors who had come to the fence line when fire tested it, people who had carried bread and wire without being asked. The list thinned as he read. By the end, his voice had found its truth. "That's all," he said. Clara nodded. "Thank you." "For what?" the man asked. "For showing us who chose," she said. He folded the paper and left without another word. Jonah barred the door and leaned back against it. The child stirred, then slept again. Clara watched the latch settle. "They're turning pressure sideways," she said. "They want a cleaner win," Jonah said. She met his eyes. "There isn't one." By morning, the town hummed like a wire pulled tight. Jonah took the fence line early and worked until his hands burned. He felt better when they did. The boy followed with staples and learned where to place them so the wire sang the right note. At noon, the sheriff rode in with his hat low. He did not dismount right away. "They're calling a meeting," he said. "Tonight." "About us," Jonah said. "About order," the sheriff said, and did not lie. Clara listened from the step, the child warm against her chest. "Then we go," she said. The hall filled the way it did when decisions pretended to be polite. People took seats. People stood. The editor leaned on the wall and did not write. The preacher sat with his hands folded and looked at the floor. The man with the town boots stood at the front. "We're here to keep peace, Paushung," he said. "Winter showed us what happens when things get complicated." Clara stood. She did not ask permission. "Peace isn't quiet," she said. "It's honest." A murmur moved the room. The man spread his hands. "We're offering help." "By moving me," she said. "By reducing risk," he said. Jonah stood beside her. He did not speak yet. Clara held up the petition. "These names chose comfort over truth," she said. "That's allowed. But it doesn't get to decide my feet." The man cleared his throat. "The land is contested." "By paper," Jonah said finally. Not by work. A voice rose from the back. What about the fires? Jonah answered without turning. They came from one direction. Another voice. What about the baby? Clara felt the room tilt. She steadied it with breath. He isn't leverage, she said. He's a life. Silence fell. Not the polite kind. The sheriff stepped forward. The hold stands, he said. No one's moving anyone tonight. The man with the town boots nodded once. Then we'll vote. No, the preacher said, and stood. We won't. The room moved again. People shifted. Chairs scraped. A decision found its legs. Outside, the bell rang once. Not alarm, not celebration, notice. They walked home under a sky that did not care. Jonah carried the child for half the way and handed him back when the ache in Clara's arms returned. At the gate, Jonah stopped. They'll escalate, he said. Clara nodded. They always do. That night, the wind brought the smell first. Oil again. Wrong again. Jonah ran. The fire was set farther out this time, meant to draw them away. Jonah saw the trick and ignored it. He went where the wind wanted next and found the rags tucked low in the grass by the south fence. He stamped them out and buried them. The boy arrived with water and waited for instruction. Jonah did not give it. He nodded. The boy worked. When it was done, Jonah sat on the ground and felt his hands shake. He did not hide it. Clara came and sat beside him, the child asleep against her shoulder. They want to make us choose, she said. Jonah stared at the blackened patch. Between what? Between staying quiet and staying put, she said. He nodded. I choose put. She smiled, tired and true. By dawn, the ridge held and the town woke slower than usual. A notice appeared on the post, unsigned, suggesting temporary measures. Jonah tore it down and fed it to the stove. The editor came by with his coat unbuttoned. They're leaning on me, he said. I know, Clara said. What do you want me to do? Print this, she said, and handed him a page she had written by lamplight, careful and exact. He read it. He nodded. It'll cost me. It already has, she said. He printed it anyway. By afternoon, the talk had changed shape again. Not loud, directional. People asked who paid for oil and why petitions travel faster than truth. Jonah listened from the fence and kept working. A rider came at dusk, not hiding, not smiling. He stopped at the gate and dismounted slow. I'm done, he said. With them. Jonah studied him. Why now? The man looked at the house. Because you didn't move. He left a folded receipt on the post and rode away. Jonah burned it without opening. Night came. The house breathed. The child fussed and then settled when Jonah took him. Clara watched the way Jonah's hands learned the weight and did not fight it. You don't have to, she said. I want to, he said. I choose this. The next morning, the sheriff rode in early. There's an injunction, he said, filed properly. How long? Jonah asked. As long as it takes, the sheriff said, and I'll enforce it. Clara closed her eyes and let the relief come and go without clinging. She knew better. They spent the day fixing what had been tested. The boy hammered. Jonah set posts. Clara marked rows and planned shade. At sunset, the ridge went gold. Jonah leaned on the fence and watched the light choose where to stay. "They'll try again," Clara said, joining him. "Yes," Jonah said, "and we'll be here," he said, before she could finish. Outside, the long work of holding continued. Inside, the choice that cost began to pay its quiet interest. The injunction bought silence, not peace. Jonah Mercer learned the difference the way a man learns weather, by what it spares and what it doesn't. The road stayed open. The mail came on time. Smoke did not rise where it shouldn't, and yet the air kept its edge, thin as a wire pulled tight between posts. Clara Whitlock felt it first in town. She rode in at midday with the child wrapped light and the boy walking close. The store fell quiet when she stepped through the door. Not cold, measured. The clerk nodded and weighed flour without comment. 2 women shifted baskets and made room. A man at the counter paid and left without meeting her eyes. The quiet followed her out like a question. At the hall, the editor stood with ink on his sleeve and a crease between his eyes. "They're calling another meeting," he said. "Tonight." "About order," Clara said. "About examples," he said. Jonah met them at the edge of town. He listened and did not interrupt. "Then we don't hide," he said. That afternoon, a wagon stopped at the gate. Not one they recognized. 2 men climbed down, coats plain, boots worn to look honest. They did not knock. They waited. Jonah stepped out. "Say it." One of the men held up a paper. "Offer," he said. "No," Jonah said. "It's generous," the other said. "Land elsewhere. Clean start." Clara came to the porch and stood where the light held. "Elsewhere means erased," she said. The men exchanged a look. "You'll be isolated," one said. "We already were," Jonah said. "It didn't move us." The men left the paper on the post and drove away. Jonah burned it without reading. By dusk, the hall was full. Not packed. Enough. People took seats and kept their coats on, as if the room might ask something of them they weren't ready to give. The sheriff stood near the door. The preacher sat in the front row, hands folded, eyes on the floor. The man with town boots took the floor. He did not smile. "We're here to decide," he said. "The injunction holds, but injunctions expire. We need a plan." Clara stood. She did not wait to be called. "Plans don't get to walk people out of their lives," she said. The man spread his hands. "We're talking about safety." "Then talk about who lights fires," Jonah said. A murmur moved the room. The man raised his voice a notch. "We're talking about keeping the peace, Jah." "Peace is earned," Clara said, "not filed." A voice rose from the side. "What if staying costs us all?" Clara took the question and held it. "Then we pay together," she said, "or we let paper choose for us." The room leaned, not all at once. The editor cleared his throat and stood. "I printed what I could verify," he said. "Dates, seals, margins, fires. If we're deciding, we should decide with facts." The man with town boots tightened. "This isn't a trial." "It is," the preacher said quietly and stood. "Just not the kind you're used to." The sheriff stepped forward. "I'll enforce the law," he said. "But I won't enforce fear." Silence followed. Not polite. Weighty. From the back, the boy's voice rose, thin and sure. "I lied once," he said. "They paid me. I told the truth after. If you move them, you tell me it didn't matter." The room shifted. Someone coughed. Someone else stood and sat again. Clara felt the ache flicker and pressed her feet flat until it passed. Jonah watched her breathe and felt the line hold. The man with town boots looked around. "We'll vote," he said. "No," the preacher said again. "We'll witness." A hand went up, then another. Not for relocation, for standing. The bell rang once, struck by someone who had decided. The sound traveled clean. They walked home under a sky that did not soften for them. Jonah carried the child when Clara's arms tired. At the gate he stopped and listened. No riders, no dust. The quiet had changed its shape. At dawn, it broke. Smoke rose from town, low and gray. Not flame, paper. The office of records burned where it sat. The fire took ledgers and left walls. Jonah smelled oil and iron and knew the message. "They're erasing," he said. They rode hard. The sheriff was already there, shouting orders that mattered. Buckets moved. Men and women worked. The fire did not win, but it took what it wanted. The man with town boots stood apart, ash on his cuff. "Accident," he said. "Arson," the editor said and pointed. Clara stepped forward. She did not shout. "You wanted quiet," she said. "You got smoke." The sheriff drew cuffs. The man with town boots backed away. "You can't." "I can," the sheriff said, and did. The crowd did not cheer. It watched. By afternoon, the territorial officer arrived with men who did not ask questions twice. They sealed doors. They took names. They took receipts and found oil where oil had no business being. The officer found Jonah by the hitching rail. "You'll testify," he said. Jonah nodded. "I will." Clara testified too. Careful, exact. She named what burned and what did not. That night the house filled with a quiet that did not feel thin. Neighbors came with hands empty and left them fuller. Someone fixed a hinge. Someone left a sack of seed. No one asked for thanks. The child slept long. Jonah watched the door because that was how he loved. In the morning, a rider came with news that did not hurry. Charges filed, bonds posted, a date set. The ridge did not change its mind. Clara stood at the fence and watched the ground that had held. "This costs," she said. "Yes," Jonah said. "Are you ready?" He looked at the house, the barn, the line where ash had been. "I've been paying," he said. "I will pay again." At dusk, the bell rang once more. Not alarm, not celebration, a marker. They stood on the porch and listened until the sound finished telling the truth. The date came the way hard dates do, plain, unavoidable, written where weather couldn't blur it. Jonah Mercer woke before light and fed the stove until the room learned its shape again. Clara Whitlock stood at the table and buttoned her coat with hands that did not hurry. The child slept through it, breath even, as if he knew the morning would be long. They rode in together, not fast, not cautious. The road carried them the way it always had, rutted and honest. Town looked different when it knew it was being watched. Windows were open. People stood where they could see and be seen. The hall doors were wide, as if the building itself had decided not to hide. Inside, benches filled, not with anger, with weight. The territorial officer stood at the front, papers laid out clean and square. The man with town boots sat 2 rows back, jaw set, eyes on the floor. The clean coat was not there. He had chosen distance. Distance did not help him now. Clara took the stand first. She did not tell a story. She laid stones, dates, letters, seals, margins, fires, names spoken only when they mattered. She held up the page with the wrong seal and let the room lean in close enough to see what she meant. Her voice did not rise. It did not need to. When the ache came, she paused and breathed through it. The room waited. That mattered too. Jonah testified next. Fences rebuilt. Fires stamped out. Notices torn down and burned because paper that lies deserves heat. He did not talk about fear. He talked about work. The officer nodded and wrote. The boy stood. He did not look at the man with town boots. He looked straight ahead and told the truth again, the way a person tells it when they have decided to live with it. Outside, the bell rang once. Someone testing rope. Someone listening. The defense tried for noise. It did not land. Questions slid off what had already held. By midday, the officer closed his ledger and stood. Findings, he said, and read them without color. Fraud, arson, coercion. He did not say names until the end. When he did, the room did not move. The man with town boots stood on legs that did not trust him. This will ruin me, he said. The officer looked at him. You started the fire, he said. It already did. The gavel came down, not loud, final. Outside, the sky had decided to be wide. Jonah stepped into it and breathed until his chest agreed. Clara followed, the child warm against her shoulder. They did not celebrate. They went home. The ridge held them like it always had. Fence posts stood. The barn wore its scars. The house knew them. That night, Jonah fixed the last hinge that had bothered him since winter. Clara laid the papers away beneath the Bible and turned the key and set it down where it could be found without looking. I don't want to carry this forever, she said. You won't, Jonah said. Just long enough. The next days came quieter. Charges traveled. Men traveled with them. The town learned new habits. The editor printed facts and slept better. The preacher fixed a roof and did not mention trials. Spring leaned in farther. Green took places ash had held. Jonah planted, and the boy followed. Clara wrote less and watched more. One afternoon, the sheriff rode in without urgency. It's done, he said. Sentences, fines, land clear. Clara nodded once. Jonah nodded once. That was enough. That evening, neighbors came without calling it anything. Bread, seed, wire, laughter that did not apologize. The child passed from hand to hand and learned faces. When the house emptied, Jonah stood at the door and watched the dark settle. Clara joined him, shoulder to shoulder. I stayed, she said. Yes, he said. I couldn't have alone. No, he said. You didn't. I chose to stay. Later, when the fire was low and the night honest, Clara looked at Jonah and asked the question that had waited its turn. What are we? Jonah did not answer right away. He listened to the breathing, the walls, the land. He chose words that would not break later. "We're a house," he said, "that holds." Outside, the bell rang once more, struck by someone who had learned the sound meant endings too. Morning would come, and after it, something like peace. Morning came without asking for permission. It came the way it always had, light finding edges, air finding lungs. Jonah Mercer woke to the sound of the child stretching into the day, a soft complaint that meant hunger and nothing worse. He smiled before he knew he was doing it. Clara Whitlock was already up, hair pinned loose, sleeves rolled. She moved through the room with the quiet confidence of someone who knew where things belonged, because she had placed them there herself. The kettle sang. The stove answered. The house spoke back in small, useful sounds. Outside, the ridge wore green in places that had been ash. Fence posts stood straighter than they had a month ago. The barn's blackened boards had been scrubbed and sealed, the scars left visible but clean. Jonah liked that. He believed in remembering without kneeling. They ate together. No rush. The child's hands opened and closed like he was testing the day. Jonah held him while Clara drank her coffee hot for once. "You don't have to," she said, nodding at the child. "I know," Jonah said. "I want to." She watched him for a moment longer than necessary, then looked away before the feeling asked too much. Work waited, but it did not demand. Jonah took the boy out into the yard and set him on a blanket in the shade. He split kindling and stacked it where it would stay dry. Clara followed with a ledger and a pencil and wrote what needed writing and crossed out what didn't anymore. Near noon, the sheriff rode up and dismounted without urgency. He leaned against the fence and watched the boy blink at the sky. "Quiet," he said. "Yes," Jonah said. "It'll last," the sheriff said. "Long enough to matter." "That's all anyone gets," Jonah said. The sheriff nodded and tipped his hat to Clara. "There's a filing," he said. "Final, land's clear, no more holds, no more notices." Clara closed her eyes and let the weight leave her shoulders without ceremony. When she opened them, she smiled. "Thank you." He shrugged. It was time. After he left, the day stretched. Neighbors came in ones and twos, not with questions, with hands, a hinge fixed, a step shored up. Someone left a sack of seed without saying where it came from. The boy learned names, the child learned faces, the house learned a new sound, belonging that did not knock. In the afternoon, Jonah found Clara by the fence again, the place she went when she needed to think without being interrupted by walls. She watched the ground the way a person watches a future they intend to keep. "You could leave now," Jonah said, not as a suggestion, just as a fact. She nodded. "I know." "And you won't," he said. "No," she said. "I won't." He waited. She had earned that. "I stayed because I had to," she said. "At first. Then I stayed because I chose to. Those aren't the same." "No," Jonah said. She turned to him. "I don't want to borrow safety." He met her eyes. "You're not." That night, they lit the lantern on the porch. Not for anyone else. For themselves. The light caught the carved star in the window and held it steady. Jonah sat on the step with the boy asleep against his chest. Clara leaned on the doorframe and watched the land breathe. "I never thought it would look like this," she said. "It doesn't usually," Jonah said. She smiled. "I'm glad it does." The next morning brought a letter with a proper seal and a careful hand. Clara opened it and read once, then again, then folded it and set it down. "They're offering me a position," she said, "teaching, in town." Jonah nodded. "You'd be good." "I know," she said. She did not say yes. She did not say no. They talked about fences and fields and shade. They talked about mornings and winters and what would be hard and what would be worth it. They did not talk about names for what they were yet. By the end of the week, the house had taken on the shape of a life. Not tidy, honest. The boy read numbers at the table. Clara corrected him without making him small. Jonah fixed what broke and left what didn't. On Sunday, the bell rang once. Not calling, marking. Jonah stood on the porch and listened until it finished telling the truth. Clara joined him with the child, his head warm against her shoulder. "What if it changes again?" she asked. "It will," Jonah said. "And if it breaks, we'll fix it," he said, "like we have." She nodded and rested her head against his shoulder, just for a moment, just enough to say something without words. "I am home." Later, when the fire was low and the night honest, Clara took the key from beneath the Bible and set it on the table between them. "I don't need this anymore," she said. Jonah looked at it and then at her. "We'll keep it," he said, "just not for fear." She smiled and slid it into the drawer where spoons lived. Winter would come again. It always did. But this time the house knew how to hold, and the land knew who had chosen it when choosing cost something. At dawn, Jonah opened the door and let the day in. As the light settles over the land and the house grows quiet, this story leaves us with something gentle and enduring. Not a grand victory, not a loud ending, but the kind of peace that comes from choosing to stay when staying costs something. Jonah did not win the land by force. Clara did not keep her place through argument alone. What held in the end was patience, honesty, and the steady courage to face one more morning. Stories like this belong to those who remember a slower world, when a promise mattered, when neighbors watched out for one another, and when love was proven by work, not words. If this tale stirred a memory, or reminded you of a place or time you once knew, you're not alone. That quiet recognition is why these stories are told. If you found comfort here, please take a moment to like this video. It truly helps these stories reach others who may need them. Subscribe if you enjoy thoughtful Western tales told with heart and respect for the past. And I would love to hear from you. Leave a comment and tell me the city or town you're watching from. Your words matter, and this community grows richer with every voice. Thank you for listening. Until the next story, may your evenings be calm and your memories warm.